Personality is broadly defined as an individual's characteristic thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Basically, it's the stable pattern of our day-to-day tendencies. Since personality reflects who we are, how we behave, and what types of people and settings we're drawn to and how we interact with them, it not only impacts what roles and organizations might be a good fit for someone, but also influences how people act in those roles and at those organizations. There are many approaches to personality theory and assessment, but this video will provide a brief overview of two of them, the Big 5 traits and the MBTI 16 types, as they pertain to the workplace. Let's dive in. First, let me say that there are dozens and dozens of personality inventories that are used to guide organizational decisions and trainings. In this video, we're only going to look at two of them, the Big 5 traits and the MBTI 16 types, both because of their popularity and because they represent two of the primary approaches to personality theory, which are traits and types. We'll start with the Big 5 traits. First, traits, in general, are personality characteristics that exist on a continuum or a spectrum. There are many tests that all measure the same Big 5 traits, which fall into the commonly used mnemonic OCEAN. You took the IPIP-NEO, which is a free, open-access version that is sourced from the International Personality Item Pool developed by Lou Goldberg. The IPIP-NEO that you took, including the score report and the scale descriptions, were developed by John Johnson. It assesses personality according to the Big 5 traits, along with 30 facets, which are basically sub-traits. There are 6 facets for each of the 5 traits, and that provides added detail and clarity about your Big 5 trait scores. For example, someone with average scores in openness to experience may have high scores in the facet of imagination, artistic interests, and intellect, but then have relatively low scores in emotionality, adventurousness, and liberalism. So reviewing your facet score results will help you understand your overall Big 5 trait results. The website included in the activity directions provides detailed descriptions of your trait and facet scores, but I'll go through each of the Big 5 here also. The O of OCEAN, openness to experience, which is often referred to simply as openness. And it refers to the degree to which you desire and are willing to try new things. This trait tends to remain stable throughout life. People who score high in this trait tend to be curious, imaginative, creative, unconventional, outside-of-the-box thinkers with high emotional awareness. They enjoy novelty and abstract topics and might be described as eccentric, worldly, or curious. In the workplace, these individuals are happiest when they're trying new things, whether that's a new work task or a work trip to a destination they haven't been to before. They're often drawn to creative fields like fashion, art, music, architecture, and writing, or those that involve a lot of variety, like a tour guide. Due to their love of novelty, people high in this trait tend to change jobs more often and/or rise to executive positions because they want to try new things and they enjoy challenges. If you've taken my personality psychology course, you've read Sam Gosling's book Snoop. In it, he shares that clues of someone high in openness include offices that are distinctive, stylish, and unconventional with a wide variety of book topics. People who score lower in this trait tend to prefer predictability. They're more routine-oriented and traditional. They like things to feel familiar and tend to be more cautious and pragmatic. They are resistant to change, concrete thinkers, grounded, practical, and predictable. They may be drawn to careers with a lot of structure and repetition that are straightforward and practical, like accounting, banking, and quality control. For all Big 5 traits, you can also score more towards the middle and be average, so to speak. That could mean that you love abstract topics and are highly creative, but also routine-oriented and cautious. Conscientiousness refers to the degree to which we engage in self-control related to long-term goals and values. It refers to our tendency to be organized, dependable, disciplined, and planful, and this trait tends to increase as we age. High scorers in this trait tend to have a lot of impulse control. They use a lot of self-regulation and are persistent, hardworking, and willing to put off what sounds good now to achieve longer-term goals. They are planners who love their lists and calendars, are highly attentive to detail, and thrive with a clear structure. They are prone towards workaholism, perfectionism, and obsessiveness. Conscientiousness is highly correlated with job performance, which should make sense when you think about its qualities: self-disciplined, reliable, achievement-striving, organized. But it doesn't necessarily predict upward job change because these individuals also put a heavy emphasis on dependability, dutifulness, and responsibility, which can keep people in the same job position for years. They also tend to be more risk-averse, which puts a negative spin on the idea of moving up the corporate chain or trying a role at a new company. Highly conscientious individuals can make excellent doctors, researchers, and entrepreneurs. According to Gosling, their offices tend to be well-lit, clean, uncluttered, organized, neat, and in good condition. On the other end of the spectrum, low scorers are more spontaneous and potentially careless and disorganized. They are more likely to be impulsive and possibly even self-sabotaging. In work environments, they are more free-spirited, flexible, and present-focused, but that comes at the expense of organization and discipline. These fun-loving people are a good fit for roles that capitalize on spontaneity, such as being a comic, camp counselor, or drama teacher. In the middle are those who are moderately reliable, organized, and self-controlled, but also willing to let go and enjoy the spontaneity of life. Extroversion is probably the trait you're most familiar with if you know nothing else about personality. However, you may, like many others, misunderstand what this trait is really about. While people associate extroversion with the number of friends someone has or how much someone likes other people, it's more nuanced than that. Instead, extroversion refers to the degree of preferred stimulation and the degree of preferred engagement one has with the external world. That means you can be an introvert who still enjoys socializing and has a lot of friends, or an extrovert who feels shy at times. Extroversion tends to remain stable or increase as we age. High extroversion is consistent with excitement seeking and an overall outgoing and enthusiastic nature. These lively people love to be stimulated by other people and their environments. It energizes them. I like to use a battery analogy to describe the two sides of the extroversion-introversion spectrum. Extroverts have a large social battery that they need to charge often and do so by engaging with the world. They tend to have highly decorated, cheerful, and inviting offices because they want you to visit them. They are drawn towards careers that align with their natural activity level and that expose them to working with others. They do great in large office settings and come across as confident and sociable. Low extroversion, on the other hand, is referred to as introversion, and unlike their extroverted counterparts, introverts actually drain their battery doing the very things that charge an extroverts. Introverts can still be social and enjoy spending time with people, but they'll want to do it less often or it will exhaust them. Similarly, they are more sensitive to stimulation in their environment and charge their batteries doing quieter activities. They prefer smaller groups and often take the observer or listener role in a group conversation. Note that while they are more reflective and reserved, introverts are not necessarily shy. They are prone to engage in conversations that are meaningful rather than small talk. People who fall in the middle of the spectrum are called ambiverts and have aspects of both extroversion and introversion. Similar to openness, extroversion predisposes employees towards seeking challenges in their careers because it meets their need for activity and excitement seeking and tends to jive well with their natural assertiveness. They are seen as leaders because they are outgoing and socially dominant, but that doesn't necessarily make them better leaders. Introverts, while more reserved, also tend to be better listeners and more reflective, which can be assets in leadership too. Agreeableness refers to the degree of concern someone has about social harmony and how willing they are to compromise, collaborate, and cooperate. It tends to increase as we age. People who score high in agreeableness tend to come across as trusting, modest, and helpful. They are caring individuals who are viewed by others as sympathetic and considerate. With that said, they run the risk of coming across as potentially naive and submissive too. In work settings, these individuals make great therapists, teachers, and nurses. Highly agreeable employees typically get along with everyone and tend to be compliant and altruistic, which can make them quite popular and in some ways make them a great team player. But sometimes being a great team player can be a detriment to the group. because someone needs to be the one to give honest feedback, to speak up when there's a problem, and to challenge the group. These employees also may not move up the corporate ladder because they tend not to want to be competitive or demanding. That's where lower agreeableness can be an asset, particularly in work settings that necessitate willingness to be unpopular. Those low in agreeableness may come across as cold, critical, and guarded. It's not necessarily that they don't like other people or don't care about them, they just don't prioritize other people's feelings over objectivity, and they'll generally choose what's best for them over what other people want. They're less likely to give someone else the benefit of the doubt, and more likely to be guarded when getting to know other people. They are drawn towards careers that do not revolve around subjective decision-making or require much compassion, such as laboratory scientists and FBI sharpshooters. And of course, you could fall in the middle, which describes someone who cares about other people's needs, but not necessarily at the expense of their own. They're not hugely inclined to cooperate or feel immense sympathy, but they're also willing to be helpful and not overly confrontive. The last big 5 trait is neuroticism, which refers to someone's degree of emotional stability and their reactivity to stress. Thankfully, it tends to decrease as we age. Someone high in neuroticism is prone to stress and has a harder time staying relaxed and calm. They are less confident than their low neurotic counterparts and worry more than them too. They tend to be sensitive and anxious and require more effort to effectively cope with the range of emotions they experience. While they are more vulnerable to criticism and difficult mood states, they also tend to be more passionate. Because of their proneness towards stress and emotionality, the offices of those higher in neuroticism tend to display inspirational posters, soothing decorations, and pictures of loved ones. Gosling refers to these as feeling regulators. That is, these are items that help people regulate their feelings. Assuming the person has worked on their coping abilities, they can make excellent clinicians, writers, and artists because they've experienced a great deal of emotional depth and have heightened sensitivity to themselves and to the world around them. On the other end of the neuroticism spectrum is emotional stability, which is characterized by high resilience, confidence, and possibly even apathy. They are more naturally relaxed, but not necessarily happier, so to speak. Low neuroticism is marked by less frequent and less intense challenging emotions, but that doesn't mean that they are more cheerful, as that's actually a facet of extroversion. While it can be helpful to have higher self-confidence and a thick skin in many fields, a moderate level of neuroticism can be helpful in terms of having more emotional depth, emotional sensitivity, and passion. It's about finding the right balance between vulnerability and coping. Facet scores can aid you in determining what's driving your overall neuroticism score and provide insight in terms of addressing them. There are many differences between traits and types that are outside the scope of this video. The biggest difference for our purposes is that traits are scored continuously on a spectrum, so you can fall anywhere between extremely low and extremely high on any of the traits. Types, on the other hand, are dichotomous, or either or. You can see on the slide that the top reflects the big 5 trait of extroversion. Someone could score anywhere along that spectrum, and the results will tell you where you landed compared to the norm. The bottom reflects a typology approach. You are either classified as introverted or extroverted, and it doesn't matter if you are 1 question or 10 questions away from the other option. There are many approaches to typology, but we're going to look at the 16 types based originally on the Myers-Briggs type indicator. There are many tests that are based on the MBTI, which is the brand name original version that is not available for free. You are taking the free Truity version called the Type Finder. Your type is a combination of each of these 4 dichotomies that correspond to cognitive preferences. The various combinations equate to 16 possible personality types. Extroversion versus introversion is really similar to the big 5 trait in that extroversion is associated with focusing attention on the outside world and introversion more towards the internal world. Sensing versus intuition refers to our preferred way of acquiring information. Sensors are more concrete, prefer facts and other tangible data, and value what can be experienced with their senses, compared to intuitives who are more abstract, symbolic, big-picture thinkers who are more likely to value their 6th sense and tend to focus on conceptual information and patterns. while sensing people are rooted in the present or maybe the past and are great at fact-finding. Intuitive people are excellent brainstormers who think more towards the future. In terms of the Big Five, intuition is correlated with higher openness to experience. When it comes to thinking versus feeling, it's about how people make decisions. Do they rely on objective, fair, logical criteria, or do they put more emphasis on social appropriateness, values, and perceived importance? Thinkers are more objective and impersonal, whereas feelers are more subjective and interpersonal. Thinkers tend to be more risk-tolerant than feelers. Feelers also tend to be higher in agreeableness and neuroticism compared to thinkers. Lastly, judging versus perceiving reflects how someone orients themselves to the outer world. For example, judging is associated with being more organized, orderly, and controlled compared to perceiving, which is more flexible, spontaneous, and open. Judging is similar in many ways to high conscientiousness. For time purposes, I'm only going to provide descriptions for two very different types to help illustrate the concept. You can find descriptions for all of the types on the website provided in the activity directions. INFJs, like me, are described as idealistic, organized, insightful, dependable, compassionate, and gentle. They seek harmony and cooperation and enjoy intellectual stimulation. People with this personality type may be drawn to the so-called helping professions, such as teachers, counselors, psychologists, and human resource professionals. A very different type is the ESTP, who are described as outgoing, realistic, action-oriented, curious, versatile, and spontaneous. They prefer pragmatic problem solving and are likely a skilled negotiator. You might find them in professions like real estate, sales, hospitality management, or emergency services. While traits and types can provide insight into our personalities, they can never perfectly predict how someone will act in a specific situation. This concept is called situational specificity because, just like it sounds, how we act is specific to the situation. Traits and types reflect our tendencies, but how we actually act is influenced by a variety of contextual factors. Everything from mood to hunger to stress to the other people involved to the environment itself. For example, too cold, too hot, too bright versus comfortable. Your personality expression, therefore, is impacted not only by your underlying personality traits or type, but also by the context of the situation. The degree to which personality versus context affect behavior has a lot to do with the situational strength of the context. In strong situations, the context is more influential than the underlying personality, but in weak situations, personality is more influential. In work environments, situational strength can be impacted by coworkers, immediate management, and top-level executives. These people give clues about what is expected and what will be accepted. So perhaps Anna is relatively low in agreeableness, and that shows with her coworkers, but in meetings with management and executives, she acts more friendly and cooperatively. It might also be that someone who is typically extroverted is quiet and more reserved around top-level executives. Outside of the people involved, someone who is typically low in neuroticism might act differently on a day in which there's rumors of mass layoffs. The term interactionism accounts for this phenomenon in which personality expression is related to situational context. It accounts for consistency in terms of our underlying personality traits or type, and variability in terms of context. Now that we've looked at traits and types, let's discuss some of the upsides and downsides to using personality inventories in workplace settings. First, while there are drawbacks that we'll discuss shortly, there are definitely advantages too, especially with the Big Five. One potential benefit is that it can deepen insight into ourselves by highlighting strengths and identifying challenges that can be improved upon with conscious effort. For example, someone who is naturally lower in conscientiousness can decide to be more organized or to use more external aids like to-do lists and calendars, despite their tendency to be more flexible and spontaneous. Someone who is higher in neuroticism can practice self-soothing and coping techniques like mindfulness and breathing exercises. Another potential advantage is that it can facilitate insight during the hiring process regarding a candidate's fit for the role and for the organizational culture in general. For example, high agreeableness is awesome for a teacher, but less desirable for a NASA scientist who needs to be objective, assertive, and willing to openly disagree with the group. The resistance to the pull of popularity can be a real asset in many fields. Another possible advantage is that it can promote better working relationships by improving our understanding of our tendencies and our colleagues' tendencies. For example, knowing that your colleague is an INTJ may help you work alongside them better as you view their behaviors in light of their personality. It's not that they don't like you, it's that they're not the colleague to choose for chit-chat or for emotional support. While there are positive sides to personality testing, there are significant drawbacks and concerns that organizations should consider. One of them is that it can lead to discrimination. For example, neurodivergent people tend to have scoring patterns that can harm their chances of being hired. This is not only problematic for the individuals who might be overlooked, but also for the organization that overlooks them. Hiring based on preset desired personality traits or types may limit the organization from hiring a more diverse range of applicants, which could restrict their creativity and innovation, as well as expose them to lawsuits. Additionally, in terms of promotions, there's good reason to be concerned about discrimination there too, including gender-based discrimination. For example, men who score higher in extroversion are more likely to be perceived as assertive compared to women who are more likely to be viewed as bossy. Another concern is that people can overly identify with their results, which is particularly problematic with typology-based tests due to their lower reliability and validity. Despite these limitations, people, and potentially their employers, tend to put a lot of weight on the results, which can be detrimental to how they view themselves and how other people view them. No one should be defined by their results on a personality test. It should guide insight rather than be used for labeling purposes. On that note, while the Big Five is often used in job placement, typology tests like the MBTI should only be used for more professional development purposes, like improving communication. The last limitation I'm going to discuss is that the results of these tests are based on self-report. The validity of one's score, therefore, depends on how open, honest, and self-aware they are while taking the test. They also must understand what the questions are asking, which might be problematic for someone who's new to the English language, for example, or who has lower reading comprehension due to inequities in educational attainment. Ultimately, there are a lot of advantages to knowing your personality and to having insight into yourself and others in general. But we shouldn't use it as an objective gauge of who we are or what we're capable of.